word park, what comes to mind? I'm guessing you're thinking big open space, lots of grass and trees and flowers. But that image was first challenged by New York's High Line, a disused elevated railway line that's been turned into a wonderful park that runs along the old rail tracks. But the concept of a park is to be challenged still further by something called the Low Line. It's a project that hopes to turn the site of an abandoned trolley terminal in New York into the world's first underground park. Is this the future of our rapidly growing megacities, for open spaces literally to be forced underground? Well, with me from New York is the designer on the Low Line project, James Ramsey, and in the studio, Richard Reynolds of Guerrilla Gardening, who's travelled the world designing gardens in urban spaces. And James, let me come to you first of all. By the weather outside the window where you are, I'm guessing that no one would want to be outside, and an underground park would be very attractive today.
This would absolutely be the perfect day for the Low Line.
So tell us what you're designing.
Well, so the Low Line proposes to use advanced solar technologies to irrigate natural sunlight down into a disused trolley terminal underneath the Lower East Side in Manhattan. And in doing so, to create a large public space, a large underground garden for the community to enjoy.
And what sort of size are we talking about? Is it several acres, or is it kind of quite a small, narrow bit of land?
It's sizable for an underground space. It's an acre and a half in size.
Right, an acre and a half in size. And what, you would expect people to come and visit it in the same way that people just, go up a set of steps and they're on the High Line?
Maybe, maybe not. I think that one of the things, as you pointed out, that's really kind of an amazing thing if we do this, is that it becomes a counter-cyclical green space that we can use on days that aren't so nice. I think on a nice day, I, like almost everyone in the world, would probably prefer to go to the High Line or Central Park. But for a good half of the year, I think the Low Line would be a more appealing space to spend time in.
Richard, you're a guerrilla gardener.
Yeah.
So you look at how you can maximise greenery in very kind of congested urban space. Is that...
It's a response to the need for space, but it's a desperate response. And it's something actually that New York led the way in back in the 70s. I've been doing it for about 9.5 years, and as a result, encouraging people around the world to do it. Roadside verges, roundabouts, neglected flower beds, and even temporary spaces, interim uses in developments that we can take and make something of as public space for as long as it's possible. And we're getting away with it. That's the great thing.
Do you think that, urban authorities spend as much time as they should thinking about how to use public space well to kind of, maximise its use?
New York is leading the way. Guerrilla gardening has gradually been legitimised, and there are pockets of community space, legitimate parks in New York that were there because of guerrillas back in the 70s. We've got the High Line, now the Low Line. London's not there. London's very slow about this. Guerrilla gardening in some places is being embraced.
Isn't the point about London, and anyone who's been here will know, that you've got fantastic parks. You've got Hyde Park, you've got Green Park, St James's Park, etc.
We have, but we've also got a lot more high-rise, a lot more dense building, a lot more people expected to move into the area. In the Elephant and Castle, we're going up, we're going high-rise. That's my neighbourhood. It's a down-at-heel area. Historically, it's changing, and yet the mayor and TfL are destroying the underground space. The subways for pedestrians are being filled in. They should be turning them into a public green space at the very least.
And James, I don't know whether you were involved in the High Line, but it's kind of worth, for maybe people who haven't been to New York recently or haven't seen it and don't even know the High Line, it is a remarkable success story, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. The High Line was an inspiration for quite a number of people. It's an abandoned train line that's elevated above the street level that's been turned into really a stunning park that I believe is the most popular park in New York City now.
So hang on. You are saying that the High Line is more popular than Central Park?
I believe it has had more visitors. I could be wrong about that.
Well, that's fascinating. It's a kind of... But there is a novelty value about thinking, my goodness, I'm walking along what were train tracks, and you can see very clearly that it used to be, a rail line, and yet there is kind of wonderful bits of growth and kind of all sorts of ambitious stuff up there.
Absolutely, and I think even more than that, I think the success of the High Line has invited people to think just worldwide and throughout the city in general a little bit more creatively about how we can begin to create public spaces and green spaces in particular.
Yeah, would you like to take your message around the world and kind of, you know, you're working on the Low Line there in New York. Are there other places where you think, you know, this city is crying out for a bit more green space or a bit more creative use of the space that's there?
Well, you know, we're entering, as I guess all of us know, we're entering the age of the city. Our cities are growing, becoming more dense, et cetera, and that's something that's only going to continue. And the idea of the Low Line, I think, is specific to a certain set of conditions. I wouldn't advocate it for every set of conditions, but the idea of being creative about how we can rethink how we begin to execute green spaces, such as guerrilla gardening, et cetera, I think is increasingly going to be something that comes to the fore.
Richard, do you find that your message falls on deaf ears, or that people are kind of receptive?
They're receptive, and in pockets in the UK and beyond, authorities are embracing this volunteerism, this enthusiasm as a resource that if they corral a bit more and provide a bit of impetus, it can provide not just a great way of greening public space, but also a social space, a way of engaging people in actually shaping their landscape rather than just using it.
Is this the responsibility of the authorities, city government, local councils, the authorities, or is this up to individuals to kind of help shape this as well?
It's both. It's bottom up and it's a bit of top-down support as well. It's fear that actually puts most people off guerrilla gardening, that they're going to get in trouble or that they're going to be thought of as being a bit weird. And it's bold ideas, whether it's guerrilla gardening or turning an underground neglected space into a public space, that is changing our cities today, not just rolling out the same old plans.
By the way, have any significance about the plants we've got in here?
I brought in my house plants. I thought they'd brighten up the studio.
They do. I think this should become a regular feature of Global. Well, I'll have a word with the editor after the show, and we'll see whether we can have pot plants every day here on the programme. James, let me just come back to you very briefly in your blizzard conditions, whiteout New York. When might the Low Line be open?
We're aiming to complete the Low Line in the next 5 to 7 years.
Sorry, how long?
5 to 7 years.
5 to 7 years. OK. I'm booking to come and see it. I love the High Line.
Good.
I'm sure I'll love the Low Line. James Ramsey, Richard Reynolds, both of you, thank you very much indeed for being with us.